Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at Murphy's. We're taking a look at a Gewehr 9840. This is a German World War II substitute standard rifle manufactured in Hungary. Now, whenever they had the chance, the German military would adopt rifles from countries that they had occupied or otherwise sort of taken control of the arms industry in, when those rifles were essentially practical replacements for the K98K. The German military needed as many rifles as it could possibly get its hands on. Domestic production was always strained, especially as the war continued. Allied bombing raids intensified and German production started to have more and more trouble actually producing. So there were Czech rifles, there were Austrian rifles that were taken into service. What makes the 9840 kind of stand out as being a little bit different is the fact that it's not a Mauser. Most of these rifles were in fact Mauser 98 systems that are functionally identical to the K98K, just manufactured with different slings and bits of different hardware here and there for other countries, and it was very easy to just bring those into the German ordnance system. The 9840 is actually an adaptation of the Hungarian 35M rifle, which is not a Mauser, it is a Mannlicher action. So essentially what happens is in 1941, when Germany has some sway in Hungary, they convince FEG to modify the Hungarian current standard service rifle, the 35M, to the German caliber. So this was originally a rifle that the Hungarians adopted in 8x56 rimmed. Germany, of course, used 8x57, which sounds very similar, but they're actually very differently shaped cartridge cases, even though they're only 1 millimeter difference in length. Hungary went ahead and not only converted the rifle, the design, to German 7.92 by 57 millimeter Mauser, but they also made a couple other changes to it to make it fit other German accessories, namely slings and bayonets. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this one. Let me show you what's different about the G9840 than the K98K. All right, this isn't a Mauser, technically speaking, but we're going to start by looking at the receiver markings. Anyway, so we have the typical German three-letter code designation here, JHV. That is the code for the Hungarian factory at FEG. Now, there is some question as to whether these rifles were in part subcontracted out to the other main Hungarian factory, which was at Danuvia. That is possible. Now, the Germans did have a code designation for Danuvia, that would be JUA. We do not see that anywhere on any of the parts for these rifles, but that doesn't necessarily mean that some of the work wasn't actually subcontracted to them. I just don't have any specific information about it. So, FEG factory code, 1941 date. You will find these dated 41 through 44. They were in production basically the entire war. And then we have the exact bore diameter marked out here on the barrel. This particular one is 7.92. The side rail is very helpfully marked G9840, rifle's designation. And then we have serial number and final acceptance proof out here. It's a German acceptance proof. And then this one is an extremely low serial number, just 138. The way these were numbered were in blocks of 10,000, so 1 up to 9999, then an A series, then a B series, C series, etc. Now, some rifles, some factories reset their numbers each year when they changed the year code on the receiver. The 9840s did not. So they started at serial number 1, which is pretty close to 138 here, and then by the end of the war they were in, we believe, the N suffix group, indicating a total production of 148,000, well, a little under 150,000. But this is the very first year 138th gun made, really very early example. The Hungarians were clearly getting into the whole German thing because they stuck serial numbers everywhere. You'll also find a bunch of Waffenamt inspection stamps. The early guns are Waffenamt WAA 56. Midway through 1942, that changed to number 173. This is an early one, so the numbers we see are 56. There is a serial number in the stock there. It's a little worn and hard to see, but it is there. And then we have the floor plate, the trigger guard, the nose cap, the underside of the rear sight, the bolt, of course, the safety, and of course we have a couple of inspection proof stamps here on the right side of the receiver, as you would expect with a German K98K. Now, this is a Mauser. This is the 9840, which is a Mannlicher action. The biggest single difference between them is that the Mannlicher is what's called a split bridge rifle, where the Mauser is not. So on the Mauser, the bolt handle is located behind the receiver here, and the receiver has a solid bridge across the top at the back. On the Mannlicher system, the bolt is located in front here, and the receiver bridge is split so that the bolt handle can travel all the way through it. This is a difference in rifle design that dates back to the 1890s, if not before. And it's just a different way to assemble the rifles. Neither one is necessarily better or worse than the other. However, what it means is these bolts are in absolutely no way parts compatible with a standard Mauser 98K in the way that most of the German substitute rifles were. It's also interesting that the Mauser system is a cock-on open, at least in the case of the German 98Ks. So when I lift the bolt handle up, you can see this piece retracting. This is when I'm cocking the firing pin spring. So that's where there's a significant amount of effort you have to expend to compress that spring. Then you cycle the bolt, and when you close it, there's basically no extra effort in the bolt closing element. On the 9840, we have what's called a cock-on close system, where when I open the bolt, the firing pin spring remains uncompressed until I go and close the bolt. Then, to go from here forward, this is where I am compressing the firing pin spring, so that takes a little bit of extra effort when I close the bolt. Enfield's, British SMLE Enfields are cock-on close systems like this. The American Springfields are cock-on open actions like the German Mausers. Again, neither one is better or worse than the other, they just behave a little bit differently. So from a handling perspective, there's really not that much different that you would need to know as a soldier using a 9840 instead of a K98K. Bolt goes up, back, forward, closed. They both use the same 8mm Mauser stripper clips. They have the same magazine system, holds 5 rounds inside the action, right down in there. By the way, there's another serial number on the magazine floor plate in there. The safety works the same way as on the 98K. It's just this flag on the top of the bolt. Bolt removal on the 9840 is a little bit different. It's just this lever, push that down, and you can pull the bolt out the back of the gun. And then we have the bolt removed. Bolt disassembly is a little bit different, but that's not something we need to get into on today's video. Something to pay attention to if you are looking to get a 9840 or one of the Hungarian rifles in the same family, the 35M or the 43M. Be aware that these extractors can be lost, are often lost. When you are looking at one of these guns, the bolt head is a separate piece that is also serialized. It is possible to fit a 43M bolt head, as well as many other parts, to a German 9840. That is sometimes done if guns are missing parts to make them more collectible. If you have a mismatched, well, if you have a matching serial number gun, you know it's all original. The way that you can best usually tell Hungarian parts from the German rifle parts is that the Hungarian rifles used a 5-digit serial number system. So they went all the way up to 100,000 instead of 10,000. So if you see a part on your German rifle that has a 5-digit serial number, that's a Hungarian part. And that's usually, when it happens, it's usually going to be extractor, bolt head, or one of the magazine components. You may notice the receiver socket back here. The stock is done in 2 parts. Got a butt stock at the back, and then a wooden front end up here. That's, again, neither better nor worse. Typically a little bit stronger, maybe stronger than it really needs to be. Because these were manufactured by, well, 2 German specifications, they have a sling bar up here and a slot in the stock to use standard German slings, and they are set up with a standard bayonet lug to use a standard German bayonet. One other last distinctive element, we have a very perfectly round front sight hood as opposed to the sort of ovaloid ones that you will generally see on German 98Ks. One other thing that makes the 9840 interesting and unusual is that it stayed in production all the way through 1944. Most of the other German substitute standard rifles were pulled out of production relatively early in the war. Basically, as soon as the factory could be retooled to make standard K98Ks, the kind of oddball stuff was ceased. They wanted uniformity in the arms supply. Well, FEG never did actually convert over to making K98Ks. They made 9840s from 1941 all the way through 44, and then in fact the Hungarian military adopted essentially the same rifle themselves as the 43M in 1943. They had their own sling and bayonet fittings on it, but otherwise same rifle in 8x57mm Mauser. So grand total of 147,400 of these were manufactured, as best we can tell, and they remained in service throughout the war. Now, a lot of these were used on the Eastern Front. Some of them fell into Russian hands. They are a relatively scarce gun to find here in the United States today, especially relative to the number of K98Ks out there. There were millions of K98Ks. There was less than a tenth that many of the 9840s manufactured. So I think it's pretty cool to get a chance to take a look at this one, which is in the first couple hundred actually made, an extremely early example, all matching. It's a little bit grungy, it's got a little bit of finish wear, but it, I think, is a really good, very honest example of a wartime service-used G9840. Big thanks to Morpheus for giving me access to this one to film for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.